The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Jakowski. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. Today's webinar topic that we're going to discuss in detail is how to achieve extraordinary sales performance that leads your industry. I've had the good fortune of hiring and training and working with over 1,000 different sales executives at different companies. And what I figured out along the way are some great competencies that if you basically build these competencies at your company, you will have extraordinary sales performance yourself. So it's truly a transformational process. And so we want to talk through those 8 competencies today and really talk about how do you achieve that extraordinary sales performance? Because it's not acquired, it's something that you actually build. It's a competency that you'll have at your company for the rest of its life. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Looking forward to your questions as we get to the questions and answers section. So please go ahead and have those available. And today's webinar is going to be recorded. So for those of you that like to share that with colleagues and friends, we want to make sure that that's available for you. Okay, so let's jump in and let's talk about the root problem that we all have when it comes to sales performance. So let me talk through some of the typical issues that we typically find. So when I talk to executives, often it's the case, hey, the sales team is not hitting their sales target. That's not unusual. I think a national stat is that salespeople, only about 55% of the salespeople out there are hitting their annual target. So that means 45% are not. We lack consistent sales execution and performance. That's pretty typical. For instance, if you are hiring different salespeople from the outside, bringing them aboard, they typically bring to your company the competency that they have from wherever they came. The key is, can you create the competencies that you want as you move forward with, let's say, 5, 10, 50, 100 salespeople? Our sales cycles are taking too long. This is very typical. There are many sales cycles that take too long. And we're going to dive into things that you can do today to actually address that. Our deals are too small. We lack the needed volume of leads and opportunities for our sales team. This is typically very much a performance. It's priming the pump. We're selling too tactically. So that's something we're going to talk about today, which is a lot of organizations, software services companies are selling at the feature benefit level of whatever that service is. And it's taking too long for new sales executives to get up to speed. So if you're like me, these are all very common issues that you have when you're talking about sales performance. And we're going to address how do you really work with those issues, and how do you actually transform your sales team, both direct and indirect, to be the sales juggernaut that you want. Okay. So let's talk about the 8 competencies. So today's webinar, we're going to focus on those competencies and how do you develop those competencies. And everybody will receive a copy of this infographic. I think it's a great way to look at the 8 competencies, the muscle that you want to develop for yourself, and then the weekly application to reinforce that muscle, to reinforce the strength that you created. So here's the 8 essentials that I'm going to cover as far as competencies today. And so we won't cover them on this slide because we're going to cover them one-on-one. But needless to say, these are truly transformational for many organizations. So let's dive into the first one. Well, the first one is about acquiring talent. And what's the best way to acquire sales talent and build that talent as you move forward? So the first thing is selectivity. So there's a couple of issues here. There's a book over here that I love to read called Top Grading for Sales. And one of the most difficult things for most companies to do is to interview salespeople. Because if they're relatively good at selling, they're going to be good at selling themselves. So it's a challenge a lot of times. So how do you break that out? Well, I want to share with you a couple ways to go about doing this because I think I've acquired that insight over many years of interviewing sales talent to really be able to assess out great talent versus mediocre talent. So here's a couple of rule of thumbs that really work well. The first is interview 10 people for every position that you have open. This sounds like a lot, but I see too often companies will interview one or two candidates and then make a choice. The challenge with that is that you're not looking at a big enough pool. And also, what you're going to find as you interview more candidates, you will elevate your criteria for what you're looking for based upon the available candidates. So I would suggest taking time to make sure you've got enough qualified candidates for each position. The second thing that is really important is, and I do this today as an example. I'm working with a company where I actually am working with the VP of sales to actually interview and recruit sales talent, both sales associates, SDRs, sales development representatives, pre-sales, and so forth. So all sales contributors, we're helping them bring aboard. But the next thing that we do is role play. So we take a typical scenario and we actually have them take us through the role play. You learn a lot when you see somebody in action. That's very true in sales, where you want to basically see how would they do in a sales situation. Another thing that's important that we do quite often is we're going to use third-party testing like DISC, DISC. These tests are really great at looking at the intangibles that the salesperson may or may not have. So you can look at their background, see their accomplishments, you can interview them, but sometimes it's hard to tell about do they have the passion and drive and desire. So these type of behavioral tests are really great to look at that. And one final note in this area, and that is creating a positional scorecard. It's something that we often do with many of our clients is really help them really look at the competencies that you want each person to achieve, not just based upon variable pay, but based upon the competency that they need to exhibit in that position. And by the way, each of these items, as we talk through them today, if you'd like to have a conversation about how do you build a positional scorecard, we can of course do that. The second area is developing your talent. So there's a lot on this infographic, but I'm going to be fairly quick on this. I talk about the four levels of a sales executive. The first one is typically a sales executive who's focused on their products and services. The second level, as you elevate from one to the next, is typically focused on how do I understand business challenges, pains, and how do I connect those to our value propositions? As you move up, we're getting more strategic and less tactical. And now, number three, we're focusing on what are the type of business outcomes that you're going to be able to achieve with our solution or service. This could be optimizing your supply chain process. It could be optimizing your financial management process. It could be any number of vital processes that you as a business have today. And then finally, level four, which is really the ultimate for a sales executive, which is really transformational. And that's where you're, as a sales executive, not only are you talking about outcomes, but you're industry and politically savvy. That means you understand decision-making process. You may understand what's needed in terms of the food chain at the company that you're working with. And you also understand agendas, political and personal agendas. So this is a great way to think about how do you move somebody from level one to level two and so forth. And that's something that we actually do quite often, which is that whole coaching process. Typically, most salespeople are level one or level two. And it's the coaching, the mentoring, that's going to help them move to levels 3 and 4. The other thing is this. We talked about the first core competency is hiring right, hire the best. To do that means that you need to take a look at your current sales team and decide, are they coachable? Can we coach them to these different expectations and levels? If you can't, then you have to realize that at a certain point, you just can't coach them far enough, and you may have to look at a replacement strategy. Okay, so that's the area. One of the clients that I work with today is we went through the whole process as I was involved, and we determined that the existing sales team wasn't going to cut it. So we actually moved the sales VP to a different role, working with strategic accounts. We brought in a new VP of sales. We brought in a new head of systems engineers. We brought in new sales executives, and we brought in new SDRs or sales development representatives. So essentially a whole team we brought in to the company. And it has been transformational for this company. Okay, let's talk about number 3 competency. Have you ever heard about this one? This is called MEDDIC. What does MEDDIC stand for? Well, if you've been in sales for a while, there used to be something called BANT. And you would check and you would qualify an account to see if they are BANT qualified. Budget, access, need, and decision maker or decision making process. So you get a good understanding of what's included in that and the timeline, of course. With MEDDIC, though, it's different. MEDDIC is about metrics. It's about understanding the economic buyer, the decision-making process, the criteria, identifying pain, and then the champions. Now, this one over here called identifying pain. In this methodology called MEDDIC, and by the way, we have looked at many different VP of sales as we've been recruiting in the marketplace. And everybody seems to have at least a good understanding what MEDDIC is from a qualification or discovery process in their sales cycles. So MEDDIC is really good, but the most important thing I say is win with buyer discovery. When you're doing a great job understanding your buyer's pains, business challenges, and issues, and you're really digging into that, it's called implicating the pain. If you do a really good job, and it has to be done up front, then you're going to do a great job in terms of discovering the pain, the challenges, and then how do you look at monetizing that? How do you look at putting a dollar value or some type of value to it? And then how do you figure out who else is affected in the company? When you start doing that, you have now set the stage for your company to win, because most people aren't doing that. Most people are moving directly to the demonstration. Most people are moving to the shiny penny. So this is really, I think, one of the most important steps in the buying and selling process. Okay? Number 4 competency is really interesting because I think a lot of times people don't think about who their champion is. Or in this case, a typo of campion. So this is the champion. Who's your champion? Who's your hero? Every solution out there, every stakeholder can be a hero for your service or solution. One of the companies that we've had the pleasure of working with is a company that provides planetarium solutions. And we realized that there were many people that were involved with planetariums. So we created the Planetarium Leadership Program to recognize the top leaders in the industry. And you can see that Brian Murphy is one of those planetarium leaders. It's really important to call out, to recognize, and to lift up who is the key decision maker involved in your solution or service. These folks are, in many cases, not receiving the recognition that they could, but they're also looking at sharing that best practices with other like-minded people in the industry. So making your customer the champion, finding the hero is really important. And this other part to this is selling and presenting an emotional attachment. Because what trumps logic? Emotion. Emotion trumps logic. So when you're able to do that, you're able to get to the heart of what the personal agenda is for the people you work with, the decision maker, the economic buyer. Let's talk about the 5th area of competency for sales excellence. And this is really going back into your current customers. So at your company, one of the questions you ask yourself is, who's responsible for our current customers? Do we have a customer success team? You probably do if you're a larger company. If you're a smaller company, you may have either an account management team or you may have a salespeople be responsible for that customer after the sale. So in each of these areas, I would tell you that there is a lot of low-hanging fruit here for your sales organization where you can actually envision a bigger solution, a bigger service, and then provide that to your clients. Now, there's two things that I would offer up to you today. One is called the Customer Success Scorecard. So, one of our customers has about 600 different customers. And one of the things that we wanted to be able to do is help them divide those customers into tiers: tier one, tier two, tier three. And so, what we wanted to do is come up with a scorecard, which you see here, that we created so that we can actually score every customer that they have. That really has given us an opportunity to figure out who's important and who's not as important. But more importantly, is being able to tier their services to those customers based upon the importance of them to them and them to them. So it's a great way to look at this. On the right hand side, we created something called the EPR, the Executive Performance Review. And we're helping them execute the EPRs with every customer at least once a year. This is just amazing if you think about really understanding your customer and your customer's business. And this is really one of the core things you want to do with your sales team is to have them be involved in these EPRs, understand how your solution or service is being used every day. And in the EPR, there's typically about 5 stages of this discussion or meeting. The first is, how are you using our service today? Really understanding that. How are you benefiting? How are you receiving value from that service or even ROI? The second area is really understanding, where do you want to go over the next year in this area? So let's align strategically with where you want to go and make sure that we're doing that. The third area is giving an update. Companies change, companies evolve. A lot of customers know who you were, not who you are. So being able to have that exchange of direction, exchange of updates is really important. The fourth area is really talking about what are the next steps? Where are the areas of mutual benefit that we can work on together? And then the fifth is really putting that plan in place. What we found with the EPR, or Executive Performance Review, it does a great job realigning you with your customers, eliminating churn, and also finding additional sales opportunities for your team. So it's a great way for you to, in a very low risk environment, to extend the value and the knowledge for your sales team through this competency. Number 6, for every sales organization, they're going to be hungry for leads. And leads come either through marketing or through their own efforts. So you got marketing generated leads, you got sales generated leads. The reason why we think about things in 3 funnels is because this first funnel is typically marketing. How are we going to generate enough leads every month for the sales organization? The second funnel is, how are we going to graduate those marketing leads into sales qualified leads or sales opportunities? And then finally, how are we going to take that wonderful prospect that we have, or buyer, through the sales process and have them become a customer? In order for you to do that, you've got to create a marketing engine. And in fact, next month, we're going to talk about how do you create the marketing engine, not only to create the lead volume and the quality that you need for your sales organization, but how do you go win a market? That's really strategic, to go out there and win a market. So the key here in number 6 is, you can't just hire great talent and develop great talent and develop out your sales playbook. You got to feed the team. And the feeding the team is giving them leads to work on. If they're really great at sales, they just want to work on qualified opportunities. And they will help you figure out how to bring those prospects to become customers. There's nothing worse than hiring a lot of expensive sales talent and not having an engine in front of them to create enough demand. So this is competency number 6. Now, in addition to this, there is something called generating sales leads. And we help many companies put in what we call account-based selling programs. So for instance, one of our customers is focused on the franchise industry. And so they provide their solution to the franchise industry. So that's an area where they've already had success. What we've done with their SDR and their sales team is taken a couple of them just to focus on the franchise industry. And they have such great success stories that we've helped them build that they really have built a really great moat around what they do in the franchise industry. Now, the key is being focused. How do we actually reach the rest of the franchises directly through their sales channel? And how do we get them involved in terms of engaging in either the education or the evaluation or the buying process? So that whole market of franchises, which by the way in the United States is about 4,000 franchisors, should be fully engaged with their solutions and services. Okay. So this is one of the keys. And by the way, as I came up through the ranks building sales teams, I wanted to really build the best sales teams, put in the best practices, and really graduate that team. The thing that I found was most debilitating was if I didn't have alignment with marketing so that we could actually have enough sales leads created through the marketing programs that we had. And so that's one of the big keys is think about the customer uh, engagement process. It starts with marketing, it goes through sales, and then it ends in client success or customer success. All that is customer facing. For your customer, they're just looking at the buyer's experience. They're looking at what their experience is working with your company. Whether they're working with you at top of funnel to understand what your company does, whether they're working with your sales organization, or whether they are a customer looking at what type of value realization are they receiving from your products and services. So these are really important to look at this not as silos, but as a connected value chain for your customer. Okay, let's talk about number 7, the 7th competency. Equip your sales team for success. What that really means is give them the tools that they need to be successful. So with one of our clients, what we did is we actually mapped what we call the buyer's journey. For a typical buyer, what is the process that they want to go through? What's the journey that they want to go through to get educated, to understand your solution, to evaluate it, and to make a decision? And so what we did is we mapped that out, and you can see that mapped out here. For each of these stages then, what we did is we mapped out what are the sales tools that you're going to need to actually engage the buyer at that stage. So for instance, in this case, if you're going after the franchise market, which this client is doing, in the awareness stage, we're going to help them think through the particular thought leadership webinars in the franchise space. You know, what are the key drivers for franchises today? How is Cavinci, in this case, addressing those key challenges? We're going to help create explainer videos, which we've done. And the videos really are great because it's a great way to socialize your content and what you have to offer throughout their organization. We've created solution overviews for them for the franchise industry because even though their solution or service may be great for other types of industries, if I'm a franchisor, all I really care about is what do you do for me and for my type of company. And then success stories. Everybody loves to hear about success stories, as we do at On Demand Advisors too. So the key here in the awareness category is creating the right set of assets that are going to be utilized by sales to actually engage your buyer at that stage. The other reason you want to do this is to get to number 8, which is acceleration. And we'll get there in just a second. But we want velocity in terms of the sales process. Now, once we work with a client and we build out the sales tools that they need, as you can see, there are quite a few tools that get built out to actually help the sales team really be successful in education and executing this repeatable sales process. But you've got to put them somewhere. So you need a repository like OneSource, where you put all of your sales tools in one location. That way, it's one-stop shopping for your sales team. They don't have to hunt around. They don't have to pack. They can also see what sales tools are needed by each step of the sales process. It makes it very easy for them to do that. Now, there's something on here called microsites. So let's say I'm working with a company, and let's say the company that I'm working with is in the franchise space, it's Orange Theory Fitness. Let's say there are 5 people that I want to share information with in an influence. I can create a microsite for them that shares exactly the information that they want to see, those 5 or 6 different things, which could be videos, could be PDFs, could be infographics, could be ebooks. And we want to put all that into a microsite and through one link, share that with these 5 people. It really does a great service for them because then they don't have to worry about trying to download or access a video that won't get through the firewall. It also is a great way for you to have better email deliverability to your prospects and buyers. So this is a fantastic way to organize all of your information one place with sales enablement tools like OneSource. Finally, on here is something called journeys. So I showed you the buyer's journey, which would be for new buyers. There's also a buyer's journey that you can have for current customers. So that journey may be different. It may be about value realization. It may be about new services that you're offering. And the other thing is, when you think about journeys or the buyer's journey, you may have a separate one for each audience. So, for instance, if you are selling your solutions today at an industry level, you may have a very different buyer's journey for pharmaceutical companies than you do for healthcare companies. And it may be very different than financial services companies, which may be very different than engineering companies, and so forth. So, being able to uh, assign and to connect the right sales tools with the right buyer's journey is a great way for you to scale and grow your organization without losing focus, without losing intention. So that's number 7, which is building all the sales tools, giving them to the sales team, enabling their success. And that brings us to number 8, competency, which is accelerating your sales process. There are quite a few ways to accelerate your sales process today. One of the big areas that we address often with clients is the website. So if you think about your buyer, you think about your prospect, the very first place they're typically going to go is your website. So is your website an information billboard? Is your website going to help educate your prospect or buyer? Is your website going to take them through the front end education and evaluation process? Is your website going to take people all the way through the end transaction and complete that process online if you have a transactional sale? The answer to all the above should be yes. So we created something called a sales-driven website. One of our customers is Technical Toolboxes, and they sell engineering performance management solutions and systems to the oil and gas industry. And what we found is that when their audience comes to the website, they're going to identify as one type of function or engineer over another. So what we wanted to do is create a buyer's journey specifically for integrity and risk management engineering. We also have another buyer's journey for corrosion engineering and so forth. So we're speaking to the very unique needs of each type of engineer organization as they go through the website. That also allows us to focus and hone the solution that they just need to manage corrosion or integrity or design. And that way you don't get lost in terms of the myriad of solutions and messages out there. In addition, though, they have quite a number of solutions and services. So if you wanted to start with the pipeline hub and understand that solution, you can also select by solution. One of the keys with a sales driven website is to allow your visitors to come into the website, select what path is important to them that they identify with, and then enable that journey in this frictionless buying process. Now, the other reason you want to do this is because if you're like me, you want your sales team to be able to reduce the sales cycle by 33 to 50%. When you could do all of that through the digital sale, the digital engagement process with the website, it really enables your sales team to focus on well qualified prospects. It also does something really important. It does the upfront education because a lot of times potential buyers are not ready to go through the sales process with you, but they do want to get educated. They do want to learn. The other thing that the website should do, if it's done well, is convert visitors into prospects. How often have you gone to a website where you come away really just scratching your head with more questions after you've been to the website than before? And so websites need to help you in this journey. So we've created this proprietary process to help you accelerate the sales process, and we call that the sales driven website. Now, that's one way to do it. I want to show you a couple other ways that you can accelerate the sales process with your sales team. Another one is called the buyer's guide. So a lot of times when we're working with clients, we realize that they don't have a buyer's guide. And so if you would think about buying something, anything you would think about today, let's say I wanted to buy, um, I wanted to work with a firm, and that firm does uh, UI and UX design for your type of solution. You don't even know perhaps what I should be looking at to evaluate companies that offer UI, universal interface, or UX, customer experience solutions. So it may be that you need a buyer's guide to actually help you hone in on the criteria that's important. This is really important because if you don't provide assistance and expertise and best practices to your buyer, they're going to wander in the desert, which will lead to a long solution. Another thing that we often do and create for many of our clients is called the Quick Start program. A lot of times, the difficulty for many people is trying to determine, how do I get started? How do I get started quickly? So here's a company, one of our companies that we've worked with, that offers a combination hardware, software, and solution service that they have. And it's really great. It's used by companies that have to go in the mining industry. They have to go down shaft. And so what we did is we created a quick start program. It brought everything together in a nice, neat bundle that somebody could say yes or no to. And that's one of the keys. So don't get caught up in a lot of iterations on quotes and back and forth. Come up with something that your buyer can understand, that they can put their arms around, and maybe have really early success in the first 30 to 90 days with your software solution, your service, or your solution in general. And just make sure that you can get them up and running and get them to value realization quickly. So let's review or recap what we just talked about today. We talked through 8 areas, 8 competencies that you can develop. And we help our clients do that every day. And we call that the Sales Performance Program. And if you kind of think through these competencies, again, just walking you through, the first one is hire the best, right? Hire the best talent available in the marketplace. The second is to develop that talent right up here. So hire the best, develop the talent, win at the discovery phase. The fourth area we talked about is make your buyer the champion, make your sponsor the champion. The fifth area is expanding your customer investment. The sixth that we talked about is really building that engine. Get the required number of either leads or opportunities that you need to create each and every month in front of your sales team. It really is your way to prime the pump. The seventh we talked about is equipping your sales team for success. Give them the tools, give them the knowledge, give them the competencies. And all these things, by the way, typically get put into your sales playbook. And then the last is accelerate the buying and selling process. And we walked you through three ways that you can do that today. Okay. All right. So thank you for walking through those 8 competencies. When you do that, and this is something that we live and breathe every day as we work with our clients, and we'd love to help you in the same mode, you actually can build extraordinary sales teams. So with that, let's open it up right now for Q&A. So go ahead, if you could, post your questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to address as many questions as we can in the time that we have allotted. Okay, the first question that we have is, how do I get started? Well, we're going to talk about that. There's a couple of things we could do. One way, which is a very typical way, is to start with one area today where you're having a sales performance issue. Let's attack that area. Let's figure out the right thing to do. Let's figure out your options. And then let's figure out how to implement that today. So that's a great place to start. You may say, our issue today is that we're very bad at forecasting opportunities, or we're not winning enough deals. So then maybe what we need to do is we need to do a strategic deal review with you every quarter for all the different opportunities that you have. Or maybe we don't have the right person in place to lead the team and grow the team, but we need to find that person and bring that person aboard. It could be any one of these areas where you start with. So good question. How do I get started? But the first place is, let's start with a conversation. Another question that came up is, how does compensation get involved here? Oh, compensation is important. When you're hiring salespeople, you've got to create a compensation plan that is going to incentivize them to deliver the results that you have. So one of the challenges I find sometimes when I look at larger companies is they have such complicated compensation plans. It's very hard for the salesperson to understand how they're going to make the income that they're looking for. So you don't want to do that, but it's not unusual when you see companies do that. The other thing that you want to be clear about is what are the competencies that you have to exhibit every day, day in and day out, just for your base salary. So this often gets lost with people. They will hire a sales representative with an $80,000 base and maybe $120,000 on target earnings. And what they'll find then basically is that, well, all of our time has been focused on how do you earn that variable compensation, not how do you earn the $80,000 base that we want you to be able to deliver for us. So the position core scorecard is a great way for you to address that. Okay, that's great. Let's talk about, here's a question. Do I coach or replace? A good question. I'll give you an example. When I was involved with a company, and we've been involved with this company, a client of ours, for 2 years, our first inclination was to come in and to work with them to coach up the team. And so we did that. We found that there were many areas to coach. But what we did also is we put in some milestones and said we need to get to these milestones by this time. If we don't get to these milestones, then we're just not going to be able to coach up to the level of performance that you want. That's where we got to with this company. Other cases, though, we've been very fortunate. At Technical Toolboxes, for instance, we were involved in coaching the sales team and building the sales team. In fact, we were so fortunate that one of the sales executives that they had there, we actually encouraged, and he became the VP of sales. So it's great to help take somebody that is in an individual contributor role and then mentor them into the sales leadership role. So that's something you ultimately like to do if you can do it internally, but you also want to be able to understand your options. Let's see what else. Here's a question, and this is, does this apply to partners as well? Great question, because many of the things that we're talking about here are going to be applying to your sales team, your direct sales team that you have today, these 8 competencies. But once you start thinking about partners, especially resellers or private label partners that are going to take your solution or service to market, the key there is you want to equip them too. A lot of times, what I found in my career is that partners weren't necessarily that adept at taking our solution or service to market. So you've got to help them help themselves. And by doing so, you may even help them with their sales effectiveness and their sales leadership that they have today. So building up these 8 competencies is really important for your company. And so I would encourage you to put those in place. All right, great questions. Thank you for those questions. So on-demand advisors, we start with strategy and we help companies really think through how they accelerate their sales success, their marketing success, their partnership business development success, and most importantly, their strategy success. So we do this through a lot of different ways. One is the 8 competencies we talked about, building out those competencies with you and your sales team. The way you can also look at this is building out your sales playbook. So every company should have a sales playbook. So when you bring aboard and you hire new salespeople, or you even have existing ones, you've got that meter that you're using to understand what kind of performance are you going to create and how are you going to enable that performance with your sales team. So we do a lot of sales enablement, a lot of sales coaching, a lot of helping to hire the right team. And these are things that we can bring to your company and help extend what you do today. One reason we love to engage with you today is because of the serial experience that we bring over hundreds of B2B companies. You're the beneficiary of that. When you hire somebody today, let's say it's a recruiter to actually help onboard some sales talent and recruit them. That's great, but do they bring that experience over many companies or many different venues? If they do, it's the type of diversity of talent and expertise you need. That's something that we bring to our clients each and every day. So let's talk about next steps that you can have from today's webinar. First of all, I am more than happy to talk to any of you about a specific sales challenge or opportunity that you have in sales today. All we have to do is set up a Zoom meeting and let's talk about that. It's a very good place to start. And so I would suggest each of you today think about 1 or 2 of those topics. I'll be following up with you after today's webinar. Make sure that you can get the recording, make sure that we can connect and offer up an opportunity for us to meet and talk about what's most pressing for you in terms of sales challenges that you're having this year. Another thing to do is to create your sales playbook. So we love to create sales playbooks with you because that's the way you're going to be able to scale talent. And then ultimately, what we do at the company level is to create this revenue acceleration playbook. So the revenue acceleration playbook is really taking your strategy and saying, how are we going to work together to increase your revenue by, let's say, 50% year over year? We get that often as we work with executives. A CEO will say to us, gee, we need to increase revenue by 50% year over year. How do we do that? So you create the strategy, and then you create the playbook, and then you implement that. And you do that very intentionally in terms of achieving the outcomes that you want. So these are some next steps that you can take from today's webinar. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank each of you for joining me today. It's been a true pleasure having you join us and participate in today's webinar. If you have any questions, if you want to talk to us or just pick up the phone, here is the contact information. For myself, for Craig and I are the managing partners for On Demand Advisors. Dale McConnell heads up all of our sales enablement, sales coaching team that we have today. He's just truly spectacular at doing that. You can call us and reach us through our corporate site, ondemandadvisors.com. But by all means, let's engage and let's help you be even more successful in terms of achieving sales performance excellence. So on behalf of myself, Dale, and Craig, and the entire On Demand Advisors team, I'd love to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for an opportunity to share these 8 competencies that will propel your organization to sales excellence.